I'd just set my coffee down when the phone rang. The name on the screen made me smile before I even answered. Laura, my daughter. "Hi, Dad," she said. That soft, sing-song tone she used to use when she wanted something as a little girl. "Afternoon, sweetheart. Just finishing lunch," I replied, glancing toward the lake shimmering through the living room window. We talked about the weather, about her busy schedule, and then she said she had to run. Dinner with friends from Evan's work. I told her to have a good evening. She laughed politely, and I heard the faint rustle of her purse. The call didn't end. At first, I thought maybe her phone had stuck. Then I heard her voice, lower now, clipped. "We can't keep putting this off, Evan. Before winter, we move him out. We sell the lake house. I've already seen listings. Quick sale, $850 easy." I froze. Evan's voice was calm, almost bored. "It's the only way." He's slowing down. "It's better for him to be somewhere supervised." Somewhere supervised, like I was a lost child. Laura's laugh wasn't the same as the one from a minute ago. It was short, sharp. "We could use the money to start the restaurant. He won't need much where he's going." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. They didn't whisper, they didn't hesitate. They were talking about my life like it was inventory in a warehouse, tagged, priced, ready to ship. Evan added, "We'll tell him it's for his health. Make it sound like we're helping." Helping. I wanted to slam the phone down, shout into the empty room, but I didn't move. I listened, because every word was a nail, sealing something shut. Laura sighed. "He's had his time here. It's our turn now." I stared at the mantel where Margaret's photo sat. Her eyes, caught mid-laugh in that picture, looked right through me. "Don't let them decide for you," she'd once told me. "Not about your work, and not about your life." The call finally clicked off. The silence after was heavier than the words had been. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff, and walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept the odds and ends, old receipts, a tape measure, a single unopened envelope from the county records office. My name was on the deed. Just mine. I set it on the table, the paper catching the afternoon light, and I thought of every board I had hammered, every stone I had laid for that house. Margaret choosing the deep blue shutters, Laura running barefoot down the dock. They wanted to sell me along with the house. I sat back, coffee long gone cold, and asked myself the question that had been building in my chest since the first word I overheard. If they thought I'd just hand it over, what would happen if I didn't? The clock ticked in the corner. Outside, the wind moved across the lake like a dark hand brushing the water. I picked up the phone, not to call Laura back, but to find another number. An old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, one who knew about property and contracts, and who owed me a favor from long ago. He answered on the second ring. "Henry? Haven't heard your voice in forever." I took a breath, steady and low. "Victor, I need to know how fast you can sell a house." There was a pause. "Yours?" "That's right. What's the rush?" I looked back at Margaret's photo. "Let's just say I want it done before someone else makes plans for me." The sound of him shuffling papers came through the line. "I'll be there in the morning." I hung up, the decision already tightening like a knot in my gut. The lake was quiet now. Too quiet. And somewhere in that stillness, I realized if I moved quickly enough, they wouldn't see it coming, but speed alone wouldn't be enough. I'd need precision, and I'd have to decide exactly what to take and what to leave behind. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept pacing the halls before my body ever did, each room like a checkpoint in a life I'd built one nail, one paintbrush stroke at a time. Before the sun was up, I made coffee strong enough to burn through hesitation and walked the length of the house with a yellow legal pad. The dining room first. My eyes went straight to the crown molding, 3 weekends of sweat and a pair of splintered thumbs, because Margaret had seen it in a magazine and said, Wouldn't it be lovely? I'd told her it wasn't necessary. She'd smiled and replied, "Neither was marrying you, but I did it anyway." The living room held the bay window where she read every Sunday morning. I'd bled through 2 pairs of work gloves installing it because she wanted to see the lake from that angle. When she first sat there with her tea, sunlight on her face, she told me the view made the whole house breathe. I wrote on the pad, "Take, wedding album, Margaret's quilt, seashell from Laura, age 6. Leave, furniture, dishes, anything replaceable." It wasn't just a list, it was a line in the sand. In the kitchen, my hand brushed over the granite countertop. Margaret had picked the slab for its gold veins, said they looked like sunlight caught in marble. I remembered lifting each section alone because hiring help would have eaten into the savings we needed for Laura's tuition. My back hadn't been the same since, but every time I ran a cloth over the surface, I felt the worth of that choice. The hallway still carried a faint scent of lemon oil from years of Margaret's Saturday cleanings. Laura's childhood height marks were penciled on the doorframe of her old room, 1996 through 2004, before she decided she was too old for such things. I paused there longer than I expected, fingertips tracing the highest mark. She'd been wearing her soccer uniform that day, grinning with a popsicle in her hand. Now she wanted me out of the picture entirely. Victor arrived just before 9. His truck crunched over the gravel, and he stepped out in a wool coat, clipboard in hand. "Henry, place looks even better than I remember," he said, eyes sweeping the porch rail I'd rebuilt after last winter's storm. I didn't thank him. Instead, I asked, "How fast can we move this?" He whistled low. "With the lake view? A week, maybe less. I've got 3 buyers who'd kill for a property like this." "Cash," I said. "Of course." As he walked through, taking photos and jotting notes, I stayed in the doorway. I didn't want to watch him measure what I'd already measured 100 times, or hear him put a number to rooms that carried my whole life. When he was done, he tapped the clipboard. "I can get you more than $850 if you're willing to wait." "I'm not," I replied. "It needs to close before they get back from their trip." His eyebrows rose. "They?" I didn't explain. Not yet. After he left, I began packing the chosen items, Margaret's jewelry box, her favorite mug that read, "Still in love since '81, and a small brass compass we'd bought at a flea market the year we married. I wrapped each piece like it was glass, even if it wasn't. By mid-afternoon, I had 3 boxes stacked neatly by the door. The rest would stay. Let them think I'd walked away in confusion, that I'd forgotten half my life. I booked the apartment above the bakery in Riverside on a month-to-month lease. Small, furnished, nothing that could be mistaken for permanent, but far enough that Laura and Evan would have to work to find me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. My pen hovered before the paper, my hand steady, but my chest tight. "Dear Laura and Evan," I stopped. Words came too easily when they were angry, and I didn't want anger to be the only thing they remembered. No, this letter would be brief, surgical, the truth without decoration. I sealed it and left it by the front door, the last thing I'd touch before walking out. But as I turned off the lights and stood in the living room one final time, I caught sight of something I hadn't noticed earlier, Margaret's old gardening gloves hanging on the hook by the back door. I took them down slowly, the leather worn smooth where her fingers had bent. For a moment, I almost put them back. Almost. Instead, I slid them into the top of the last box, because I had a feeling I'd be needing them sooner than I thought. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the boxes were already in the back of my truck. I'd left the letter by the door, the ink barely dry, but I wasn't walking out yet, not until I'd done one last sweep. I started in the bedroom. The closet looked strange without Margaret's dresses, just my shirts lined up like soldiers that hadn't seen action in years. I ran my hand over the oak dresser we'd bought secondhand and refinished together. I'd leave it, Let them see the outline where her jewelry box once sat and know they couldn't buy back what mattered. Downstairs, the air was cool and smelled faintly of cedar from the beams I'd sanded myself. Every creak in the floor spoke to me like an old friend. At 9:15, Victor's truck pulled up again, this time with a man in a navy coat stepping out behind him. "Henry, this is Patrick Moore," Victor said. "One of the cash buyers I mentioned." Patrick had that way of looking at a place like he was reading a book he'd already decided to buy. He asked the right questions: how old the roof was, when the dock had last been replaced. I answered plainly, without the usual pride I might have shown in the past. He walked into the kitchen, paused at the bay window, and nodded. "This is it," he said. "I'll take it." No counteroffers, no hesitation. Just like that, 20 years of my life were about to change hands. Victor and I stepped outside to talk numbers. "Full price," he said quietly. "860, no contingencies. He can close in 5 days if you're ready." I didn't blink. Draw up the papers. By noon, the contract was signed, the deposit wired. I had exactly 5 days to disappear. That afternoon, I drove into Riverside for the first time. The bakery was downstairs from my new apartment. Its windows steamed from fresh bread baking. A chalkboard sign out front read, "Try our cinnamon rolls, warm all day." Inside, the air was sweet and yeasty. A woman with short silver hair was arranging pastries on a tray. She looked up, smiling like she'd been expecting me. "You must be the new tenant upstairs," she said. "Henry Collins," I replied. "Sophie, I own the place. The apartment's small, but you'll sleep like a king with the smell of bread coming through the floor." She handed me a loaf still warm from the oven. "Welcome gift, no charge." I thanked her, but the truth was, I didn't remember the last time someone had given me something without an angle. Upstairs, the apartment was simple. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and a balcony barely big enough for 2 chairs. But from it, I could see the river bending out of sight behind the row of shops. For the first time in days, my shoulders loosened. That night, I stacked the boxes in the corner, the gardening gloves on top. I ate bread and butter for dinner, listening to the quiet hum of the street below. No lake, no dock, no ghosts in the hall. But I wasn't done yet. Before bed, I drove back to the lake house one last time. Parked far enough away that the truck wouldn't be noticed, I slipped through the side yard and crouched by the garage. I'd bought a tiny camera disguised as a phone charger that afternoon. Cheap, discreet, but good enough to catch the moment I was planning for. Inside, I plugged it in by the front entry table, angled perfectly toward the door. One press on my phone confirmed the feed was live. On my way out, I paused in the driveway, the letter still taped to the door. I pictured Laura's face when she read it, Evan's silence when he realized the game was over. I should have driven away then, but I didn't. I stood there in the dark, wondering if they'd try to talk me out of it or skip straight to anger. Wondering, more than anything, if either reaction would make me feel anything at all. The night air was sharp. The lake lay still as glass. Somewhere out there, they were laughing over dinner. Sure, their plans were safe. They had no idea their clock had already started. I woke early the next morning, though I hadn't slept much. The feed from the little charger camera was still open on my phone, showing the front hallway of the lake house bathed in soft morning light. The letter was right there on the door, waiting like a coiled spring. I poured coffee, sat by the window of my new apartment and told myself I wouldn't keep checking. That lasted all of 7 minutes. By late afternoon, the screen was still empty, just sunlight shifting across the hardwood I'd laid with my own hands. No movement, no sound. The calm before something I couldn't quite name. At 4:06 p.m., a black SUV rolled into the driveway. My breath caught before I could stop it. Laura stepped out first, sunglasses, a paper cup of coffee, phone in her other hand. Evan followed, pulling two rolling suitcases like they were returning from a vacation, not walking into the center of a storm. They looked relaxed, certain. Laura went straight for the front door, her key already in hand. I leaned closer to the phone. She slid it into the lock, jiggled once, twice, then stopped. Her smile faltered. She tried again, harder this time, and I could almost hear the metal resisting. She stepped back. "Evan, it's not working." He took the key, gave her that "let me handle this" look, and shoved it in. No turn, no click. He muttered something I couldn't catch and stalked around the side of the house. The feed stayed empty for a moment. Then Laura reappeared, standing motionless, eyes locked on the envelope. Her hand lifted slowly, like she was reaching for something hot. She peeled the tape free, unfolded the page. I'd written only what was necessary. "Laura, Evan, I heard your plans. The house has been sold for $860,000. The proceeds are mine. Your belongings are in storage on Grant Street, Unit 14B. You have 30 days. You wanted me out of the way. I made it easy. Dad." She read it twice. Her hands shook just enough for me to notice. Evan came back into view, his face tight. "What the hell is this?" "He sold it," Laura said, voice flat. "That's not possible." "It's done." They stood there for a long beat, not looking at each other, both looking at the door, as if it might suddenly open and undo everything. "Where's our stuff?" Evan asked. "In storage," Laura said. 30 days. We need to call him." "He's not answering." There was a pause, an almost imperceptible shift in her voice when she added, "It's all gone." I sat back in my chair, the phone still in my hand. I didn't smile, not yet, because this wasn't the moment of satisfaction I'd been picturing. It was something quieter, heavier, the realization that justice doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it just slips in, changes the locks, and leaves a letter. On the feed, Laura folded the paper and tucked it into her bag like it might burn her fingers if she held it too long. Evan's jaw worked as he stared at the door, but he didn't try the lock again. They walked back to the SUV slowly, no suitcases this time, just the weight of a reality they hadn't planned for. I watched until the taillights disappeared down the drive, the letter still out there somewhere in Laura's bag, ticking like a clock they couldn't stop, and I knew this was only the first round. They didn't call that night. I'd half expected the phone to start ringing before they were halfway down the road, but the apartment stayed silent except for the occasional hum of traffic from the street below. The first ring came the next morning, sharp enough to make my coffee ripple. Laura's number. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. By noon, there were 5 missed calls. Then Evan's name appeared. I waited until it stopped, then tapped the screen to play his message. "Henry, listen. I don't know what you think you heard, but this is a misunderstanding. We were talking about long-term plans, your health, your comfort. Selling the house was about helping you, not pushing you out. Laura's upset. We all are. Call us so we can straighten this out." Straighten it out. As if this were a loose picture frame on the wall. I deleted it without saving. In the days that followed, the calls became less frequent but more pointed. Shorter voicemails, clipped tones. Evan's voice got sharper. Laura's went syrupy sweet. "Dad, we just want to talk. You can't keep avoiding us." Avoiding. That was the word she chose. Not protecting myself, not recovering from betrayal. Avoiding. By Friday, a letter arrived. My name in Laura's handwriting, the same looping cursive she'd used on thank you notes as a child. I opened it carefully. "Dad, we're struggling to understand why you would do this without speaking to us. That house was more than property. It was part of our family history. Even a portion of the proceeds could help us get back on our feet. We're not asking for everything, just a fair share. Please reconsider." Laura, fair share. I folded the letter once, then again, until it fit neatly in the bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet. Not the trash, not yet. Some words are worth keeping as reminders. The next morning, I walked down to Sophie's bakery for breakfast. She was wiping down tables when I came in. "You settling in all right?" she asked. "Better than expected," I said. She nodded toward the loaf I picked up. "Bread's on the house again. You look like a man who needs it." It was the first gift I'd accepted without suspicion in a long time. That night, I sat on the balcony, the town quiet around me, and realized I wasn't waiting for their calls anymore. I wasn't checking the camera feed every hour. My mind had started wandering to other things, small, normal things. Still, the lake house lingered in my thoughts. Not the building itself, but the invisible weight I'd lifted when I signed it away. Then, just as I was drifting toward sleep, my phone lit up with a notification from the camera, motion detected. The feed opened to show headlights cutting across the driveway. The SUV again. Laura got out alone this time, walked to the front door, and pressed her palm flat against it, like she could feel the life still inside. She stood there for a long moment before turning away. No knocking, no calling out my name, just leaving. And I couldn't tell if that meant she was giving up or planning something else entirely. The following week, the calls stopped. It wasn't peace, it was too quiet for that. It felt like the pause in a storm when you can smell the rain before it hits again. The first sign came from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my old neighbor, Carl. "Henry, I don't mean to pry," he said over the phone, "but I saw a moving truck in your driveway. Figured you were downsizing. Then I saw Evan selling your old lawnmower online. Said they had to clear out extras for their new place." Extras. That lawnmower had cleared 1/2 acre of grass for 20 summers. Margaret used to bring me lemonade while I worked. 2 days later, I checked their social media. Laura's profile was quiet, almost scrubbed. But Evan's, he'd listed half their furniture for sale. Executive desk, leather sectional, high-end mattress, lightly used, must pick up. Prices dropping in real time. Desperation has a smell, and I could smell it from miles away. That night, I sat in the bakery with a cup of coffee when Sophie leaned across the counter. "You hear about that new restaurant downtown? The one Evan kept talking about starting? Investors pulled out. Word is, he's blaming personal setbacks." Personal setbacks, that was one way to put it. 3 days later, a plain envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was small, uneven, a child's. "Dear Grandpa Henry, Mom says you live far away now. She also says you're the reason I have a garden name. My name is Lily. Mom cries sometimes when she talks about you, but she also laughs. She said maybe one day I can meet you if I'm brave and kind." The letters were crooked, pressed hard into the paper. There was a small heart drawn at the end. I set it on the table and stared at it long after my coffee had gone cold. Lily. Laura had never told me she was pregnant. The timing gnawed at me. Was this a child trying to reach her grandfather, or Laura's new angle? That night, I pulled the gardening gloves from the top of the moving box and set them on the counter. My hands hovered over them. The thing about cracks is, they don't always mean collapse. Sometimes they're just where the light gets in, but I couldn't yet tell which one this was. It was a Tuesday afternoon, grey and damp, the kind of day where the river seemed to fold into the sky. I was upstairs in the apartment, mending a loose button on my jacket, when Sophie called up from the bakery. "Henry, someone's here for you." Her voice carried an odd note. Not cheerful, not worried, just watchful. I came down the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. At the bottom stood Laura. She wasn't in her usual armor, no makeup, no tailored coat. Her hair was tied back messily, and she looked like she'd been living out of a suitcase. In her arms was a small girl with dark curls and wide brown eyes. She was clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear half chewed. Laura shifted awkwardly. "This is Lily," she said quietly. "I thought you should meet her." Lily hid her face in Laura's shoulder for a moment, then peeked at me. "Are you the one who grows things?" It caught me off guard. "I might be," I said. Her face brightened just enough to make the room feel warmer. "Can you show me?" Laura started to speak, maybe to explain or apologize, but I held up a hand. "There's a park by the river," I said to Lily. "Come on." We walked in silence. The wet grass soaked the edges of my shoes. When we reached the park's small garden beds, I knelt beside a patch of bare soil. "Daffodils," I told her. "If you plant them now, they'll bloom in spring." She crouched next to me, watching closely as I showed her how to dig a shallow hole with her hands. She pressed the bulb in like it was a secret. Laura stood a few feet back, arms crossed, not defensive, more like someone holding herself together. When we were done, Lily brushed dirt from her fingers and looked up at me. "Will they remember me?" Her question lodged itself somewhere in my chest. "If you take care of them, they will," I said. Laura's eyes met mine then, a flicker of something I hadn't seen in years. Not manipulation, not entitlement, just uncertainty. We walked back to the bakery without speaking. At the door, Lily turned to me. "Can I come again?" I looked at Laura. She hesitated, then said softly, "Only if you want us to." I nodded once. "You can come." Lily grinned, but Laura's expression stayed unreadable. As they walked away, the little girl waving over her mother's shoulder, I realized I wasn't angry, but I wasn't ready to trust either. And in that thin space between the two, something was quietly starting to grow. They came back the following week, not with gifts, not with speeches, just with dirt under their nails and a paper bag of bulbs Lily had picked out herself. We planted in the small strip of soil behind the bakery. She worked with the precision of someone twice her age, spacing them carefully. "You said they need room to grow," she reminded me. Laura sat nearby on the low stone wall, not hovering, not directing. She watched. It became a rhythm, sometimes once a week, sometimes twice. Lily would arrive with a drawing, a flower, a bird, a house, and we'd work on the garden together. Laura didn't always stay. Sometimes she walked the block, sometimes she sat knitting something she never seemed to finish. One afternoon, Lily asked, "Will these be here forever?" I shook my head. "Nothing stays forever, but if they go, someone else can plant more. That's how gardens work." She nodded like she understood more than she should. Laura started bringing small things. A loaf from another bakery, a jar of jam, once even Margaret's old lemon square recipe in her handwriting. She didn't explain how she'd found it, just slid the paper across the table like an offering. One evening, as Lily washed her hands at the outdoor spigot, Laura spoke without looking at me. "I've been going to therapy. I've had to hear things I didn't want to, that I took without giving back, that I punished steadiness because I didn't know how to stand still." Her voice didn't crack, but it wasn't steady either. "I can't undo it," she said, "but I can stop pretending it didn't matter." I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't need to. Some things are heavier when you rush to set them down. By fall, the daffodils had been replaced by bright zinnias. Lily's drawings had more detail now. She'd started giving the flowers stems, leaves, even shadows. One morning she handed me a new one. 3 figures standing in front of a house. "That's you," she said, pointing to the tallest. "That's me, and that's Mom. She's still learning, so she has a watering can." Laura smiled faintly at that. On the last warm day before the frost, Lily and I built a small birdhouse from scrap wood Sophie had saved. She held the hammer like it was a magic wand. "Do you think birds will like it?" "Eventually," I told her, "if we give them time and don't rush them." She nodded solemnly, then set it gently on the post. That night, after they left, I sat on the balcony, Margaret's gardening gloves folded beside me. The air smelled faintly of bread from downstairs, and somewhere in the distance, a single wind chime clinked. I thought about the house by the lake, about the locks and the letter, about the silence that followed. And I realized the revenge had never been the sale. It was this, sitting here whole, with soil under my nails and no weight on my chest, knowing they thought they could take my life and instead gave me room to grow another. Sometimes the slow way is the only way that lasts. And sometimes the thing you plant doesn't just bloom, it changes the ground beneath your feet forever. I hope you enjoyed today's story here on the Grey Revenge channel. If you did, then please like, share, and tell us your own story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Help us grow as a storytelling community and be part of this with us. Can I count on you? Thank you so much.